Good evening. So we are discussing about tissues. So I told you there is a epithelial tissue, connective tissues, muscular tissues or nervous tissue, 4 types. So tissue is a, what is tissue? Tissue is a group of cells, right? So tissue, human body is made up of 4 tissues. One is your epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscular tissues and nervous tissues. So in earlier video we have already covered epithelial tissues and connective tissues. Now we are going to discuss about muscular tissues. So muscular tissues, as I told you earlier as well, there is a specific feature of each and every tissues which make it different from the others. So what is the specific features of the muscular tissues which make it different from the other tissues? Muscular tissues contains the contractile proteins, whereas other tissues don't contains the contractile proteins. So muscular tissues में contractile proteins होती है, बाकी किसी tissue में नहीं होती. Contractile proteins which helps in the contraction because muscle has to be contract, whether it is smooth muscle, whether it is skeletal muscles. तो इनको कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करना है, तो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करना है तो इनके पास कॉन्ट्रैक्टाइल प्रोटीन्स हैं लाइक एक्टिन एंड मायोसिन, राइट? एक्टिन एंड मायोसिन. सो मस्कुलर टिश्यूज कंटेन्स द कॉन्ट्रैक्टाइल proteins, whereas other tissues don't have a contractile proteins, so it helps in the contractions. So in muscular tissues there are 3 types. One is your smooth muscular tissues, then there is a cardiac muscular tissues, then there is a skeletal muscular tissues. So there are 3 types. One is smooth muscular tissues, cardiac muscular tissues and skeletal muscular tissues. So the movement of smooth and cardiac muscular tissues is involuntary in nature, involuntary, and this one is voluntary. So what is the difference between voluntary and involuntary? Voluntary means the movement is under our control. अगर मैं ये हाथ मूव कर रहा हूँ तो मेरे कंट्रोल में है, मैं इसको कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करना चाहूँ तो मैं कर सकता हूँ, नहीं करना, तो इट्स माई कंट्रोल. सो दैट इज वी कॉल्ड वॉलेंट्री मूवमेंट, वॉलेंट्री, अंडर माई कंट्रोल. इनवॉलेंट्री मूवमेंट्स मीन्स इट्स नॉट अंडर माई कंट्रोल. क्या आप अपने वेंट्रिकल्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कर रहा है या कितना कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करेगा, या आप उसको रोक सकते हो? नहीं रोक सकते, आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं है. अगर स्मूथ मसल, जीआईटी के स्मूथ मसल अगर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं, क्या आपके कंट्रोल में है कि उनकी कॉन्ट्रैक्टिलिटी को रोक दें? नहीं है. दैट इज वी कॉल्ड इनवॉलेंट्री मूवमेंट. So there is a voluntary and involuntary movement. So voluntary movement is the movement which is under your control, and involuntary movement is which is not under your control. So the movement of your smooth muscular tissues and cardiac muscular tissues is involuntary in nature. वो आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं है. बट स्केलेटल मसल की मूवमेंट आपके कंट्रोल में है. मैं ये मूव कर रहा हूँ तो ये मेरे कंट्रोल में है. अगर मेरे वेंट्रिकल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं, क्या मैं अपने वेंट्रिकल के कॉन्ट्रैक्शन को कंट्रोल कर सकता हूँ? नहीं कर सकता. दैट इज योर इनवॉलेंट्री. So how these contractions happens, smooth muscular tissues and cardiac muscular tissues. So many times we have discussed cardiac as well as smooth muscular tissues. So how they contract, smooth muscular tissues and cardiac. So when we talk about cardiac muscular tissues, for example, this is your ventricles and these muscular tissues has to be contract, and these contains the proteins actin and myosins, right? Contractile proteins. So how it contract? So I told you there is a action potential, resting membrane potential. So cardiac cell has a minus 90 millivolt. So whenever any stimulus comes from, for example, SA node to AV node, and that AV node's stimulus is reached to the ventricles, so these conductions, what will happen? Your sodium channel is going to open, and movement of sodium will happens from outside to inside. And I told you many times why it is so, क्योंकि सोडियम सेल के बाहर ज़्यादा होता है, अंदर कम होता है. तो जब भी सोडियम चैनल ओपन होंगे तो बाहर से अंदर ही आएगा, राइट? तो सोडियम चैनल जब ओपन होंगे तो सोडियम कंटेन्स पॉजिटिव चार्ज होता है, तो एक्शन पोटेंशियल क्या है? नेगेटिव में. तो पॉजिटिव जब अंदर आएंगे तो ये एक्शन पोटेंशियल थोड़ा नेगेटिव होगा. जब ये थ्रेशोल्ड पे पहुँचेगा तो और चैनल खुलेंगे, एंड दीज चैनल वी कॉल्ड वोल्टेज गेटेड सेंसिटिव सोडियम चैनल. तो ये वो चैनल हैं जो इनके नाम से ही इंडिकेट होता है, ये चैनल सेंसिटिव है. सेंसिटिव किस चीज़ के हैं? वोल्टेज के. जब आपका एक्शन पोटेंशियल थ्रेशोल्ड पे पहुंचेगा तभी ये चैनल ओपन होंगे, अदरवाइज नहीं होंगे. तो when your action potential reach to the threshold values, so where that time your voltage gated sensitive sodium channel, calcium channel will open और they contain the positive charge. तो और ज़्यादा पॉजिटिव चार्ज अंदर आएगा, तो एक्शन पोटेंशियल आपका पॉजिटिव साइड जाएगा, राइट, पॉजिटिव साइड जाएगा. देन योर दैट इज फिनोमिना वी कॉल depolarizations. योर membrane is going to depolarize, right, it lose its negatively because resting it's a negatively polarized. So now it become depolarized, and ultimately there is an influx of calciums and sodium. So influx of calciums, I told you when calcium enter inside the cardiac cells. So in originally there is a smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum is a storehouse of calcium ions. So these calcium has a receptors on this, and it will do the release of more calcium. So more calcium will release, and this calcium will bind with tropomyosin. And when calcium bind with the tropomyosins, then your actin and myosin filaments will be interact with each other. For example, this is your actin, this is your myosin, so they will interact with each other because calcium binds with the tropomyosins and it will interact with each other. When actin and myosin filament interact with each other, it will result in ventricular contractions, right. So this is the mechanism how your cardiac smooth muscle contract, right. And again then it's a relaxations, we have discussed it, relaxations will happens, this positive charge will go outside, and there is a pump, right, sodium calcium exchanger, then there is a sodium potassium pump. So by that one your cardiac cells is going to relax. So this is the mechanism by which your cardiac smooth muscles contract. So if you compare the mechanism by which smooth muscle contract, there is a slight differences between these two mechanisms. Again for the contractions, again calcium is responsible for the smooth muscle as well. For example, if you are talking about venous smooth muscle, arterial smooth muscle, so calcium ion is playing a major role in the contraction of smooth muscle as well. In ventricle also calcium is playing a role. But in this case, your calcium is going to enter inside the smooth muscles when there is any stimulus. So calcium is going to enter, and calcium is going to bind with calmodulin, and it going to activate myosin light chain kinases, MLCK, myosin light chain kinases. So it's going to activate myosin light chain kinases. So these myosin light chain kinases will do the phosphorylations of myosins, and when myosins is phosphorylated, it will interact with the actin and result in contractions. So that is the difference, right? Smooth muscle contractions or your cardiac smooth muscle contraction. In cardiac, there is a calcium bind with tropomyosins, and it will bind here. Calcium binding with the calmodulin. Calmodulin is going to activate myosin light chain kinases. Myosin light chain kinases, that is name indicate, it will do the phosphorylations of your myosins. Myosins, when phosphorylated, it will interact with the actin and result in the contractions, right. So this is the mechanism by which your smooth muscle contract. But again, one smooth muscle still left, not smooth muscles, so your muscular tissues is again left, that is your skeletal muscular tissues. So their contraction is different. Skeletal muscular tissues contraction mechanism is different as compared to cardiac and smooth muscular tissues contractions. So skeletal muscles contract under the influence of your parasympathetic systems, and neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a major neurotransmitter which is involved in the parasympathetic system. So acetylcholine, how it biosynthesized, there is a channels to uptake the choline, and from where you got the choline you will get from the food. आपने खाना खाया, वहाँ खाना टूटा, वो एब्जॉर्ब हुआ, यहाँ पे ट्रांसपोर्टर है कोलिन का. सो कोलिन विल बी अपटेक इनसाइड द सेल्स, एंड देयर इज ए एसिटाइल कोएंजाइम ए which is formed from the mitochondria. This acetyl coenzyme A will bind with the choline and do the formations of acetylcholine, that is we noted as a acetylcholine, ACH. So this acetylcholine is stored inside the vesicles, तो वेसिकल में स्टोर हो जाएगा. Whenever any stimulus is generated, so what will happen? There is a movement of ions, ion channel will open, like for example sodium channel open. So sodium will enter inside the cells. When your action potential reach up to threshold, more positive ions move inside the cells, and this vesicle will be diffused with the membrane, and the chemical which is stored inside the vesicle will come out. And you know, between the neuron there is a space that we call synaptic left. It will reach here, and in the postsynaptic receptors on the skeletal muscles there is a receptor for the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine have a receptor all over the body. Is two types of receptors. One is muscarinic, another one is nicotinic. We represent is M and N. These are the receptors of acetylcholine. M and N, muscarinic and nicotinic. Muscarinic is further divided into M1, M2, M3, and nicotinic is further divided into NM and NN. These muscarinics, all the muscarinics are GPCR, and these nicotinic are your ligand gated ion channel receptors, ligand gated, or we call it ion channel receptors. Nicotinics, all nicotinic receptors are your ligand gated ion channel receptors. And if you remember, when we talk about adrenaline, non-adrenaline, the receptors are alpha and beta, and both alpha and beta receptors belongs to GPCR. None of the sympathetic system receptor belong to ligand gated. Ligand gated ion channel receptors are your nicotinic receptor, and nicotinic receptor are of two types, NM and NM. NM is on neuromuscular junctions and NN is on nicotinic ganglia. So we are talking about skeletal muscle contraction. So these are the receptors which are present on neuromuscular junctions. NM receptors here, right? This is your neuron, this is your muscular part, right? This is your muscular part, this is your which neurons? Motor, not the sensory. You know, motor and sensory neurons. Sensory neuron are those neurons which take the signal towards the brain and analyze the informations, and from brain to periphery, that is your motor neurons. So now we are talking about motor neuron. This is the motor neurons which contains acetylcholine, and this is the your muscular part, skeletal muscle part. So this is your muscular end plate, and this is your this is your neuro. So this is neuromuscular, and this junction we call neuromuscular junction, NMJ. जंक्शन क्या होता है? जो आपका गैप हुआ, राइट? तो किस चीज में गैप है? न्यूरो, दूसरा टर्म क्या है? मस्कुलर, जिससे मस्कुलर पार्ट एंड जंक्शन. मस्कुलर पार्ट पे आपके रिसेप्टर कौन से हैं? निकोटिनिक रिसेप्टर हैं. किसके रिसेप्टर हैं? एसिटाइलकोलिन के. कौन से हैं? NM. M रिप्रेजेंट मस्कुलर, निकोटिनिक receptor which are present on muscular, right? And these receptors belongs to ligand gated ion channel receptors. So when we talk about ligand gated ion channel receptors, if you see the configurations, there is a alpha, beta, gamma, delta. These are the subunits of ligand gated ion channel receptor. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So I told you many times, whenever your chemical or drug is going to bind with the receptor, it's not going to bind with the whole receptor. It's going to bind with the particular site of the receptor, and that site we call active sites, right? So in this case, acetylcholine is not going to bind with all the subunits. Acetylcholine will bind with alpha, these two. These are the binding site for the acetylcholine. When acetylcholine bind with alpha receptors, this pore size is going to increase. When your pore size is going to increase, more influx of ions. And in this case, which ions is going to be influx? Your positive ions, right? Your cation is going to enter more. So when your cation enters inside the cells more, so your action potential will goes towards the positive side and result in depolarizations and contractions. So we are studying about how your skeletal muscles are contracting, right? So this is the mechanism of skeletal muscle contractions, and contractions of your smooth muscular tissues and cardiac muscular tissues is different, right? That is your calcium dependent contractions. These are your acetylcholine based contractions. So this is about your muscular tissues. Again, muscular tissues have a special feature. It contains the contractile proteins, actin myosin filaments, and these contractile proteins helps in the contractions. There are some movements are involuntary, some are voluntary. So voluntary movements are under your control, like skeletal muscle contractions. Involuntary movements are not under your control, like smooth muscle contractions, like your cardiac muscle contraction are not under your control, right? It will contract. you can't control it. But in skeletal muscles, contraction is depend upon acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a major neurotransmitters. How it biosynthesizes in the neuron? In neurons, there is a choline channels, and from where you are getting the choline? Choline you are getting from the food, and choline uptake is happen. Choline will enter inside the neuron, and in the neuron, in the mitochondria, there is a acetyl coenzyme A. So acetyl coenzyme A will bind with the choline and do the formations of acetylcholine. And in acetylcholine, whatever acetylcholine is here, when it contraction happens, so remaining acetylcholine will be destroyed by one enzyme. That name is acetylcholine stearase. So acetylcholine stearase is enzymes which will do the degradation of acetylcholine, which is present in the synaptic lap, right? You don't want continuous movement, continuous contraction. So nature has provided one enzyme. That enzyme name is acetylcholine stearase. And what this enzyme is going to do? This enzyme is going to do the breakdown of acetylcholine, right? So acetylcholine will be breakdown. So in some diseases like your Alzheimer disease जो कि ओल्डर एज पेशेंट्स की डिजीज़ है, जिसमें याद ही नहीं रहता कुछ भी. इवन अल्जाइमर के पेशेंट्स को अगर घर से निकल गया तो उसको घर का एड्रेस भी भूल जाएगा वो. दैट इज़ द सीवियर कंडीशंस ऑफ योर अल्जाइमर डिजीज पेशेंट्स. तो उस केस में देयर इज वन ऑफ द हाइपोथेसिस, दैट इज द कोलिनर्जिक हाइपोथेसिस. उसमें ये माना जाता है कि अल्जाइमर का जो पेशेंट्स है उसमें एसिटाइलकोलिन सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम में कम बन रहा है. तो आप ऐसी दवाइयाँ देते हो जो एसिटाइलकोलिन, जो ये एंजाइम्स तोड़ता है नॉर्मली एसिटाइलकोलिन को सिनेप्टिक लैप में, उसको ब्लॉक कर दें. इसको ब्लॉक कर दोगे तो थोड़ी बहुत आपका एसिटाइलकोलिन का लेवल बढ़ जाएगा, राइट. तो जैसे ड्रग्स हैं डोनेपेजिल, रिवास्टिगमिन, गैलेटामाइन, दीज ऑल आर दी एसिटाइलकोलिन स्टीयरेज इनहिबिटर्स. एक डिजीज है दैट इज रिलेटेड टू योर दीज स्केलेटल मसल्स रिसेप्टर्स रिलेटेड टू एनएम, दैट इज योर माइस्थीनिया ग्रेविस. सो माइस्थीनिया ग्रेविस, यू माइट हर्ड अबाउट माइस्थीनिया ग्रेविस. Myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is the one of the disease in which antibodies are formed against neuromuscular receptors. ऑटो एंटीबॉडीज बनेंगी बॉडी में, वो क्या करेंगे, इस न्यूरोमस्कुलर रिसेप्टर को तोड़ देंगी. तो आदमी पूरा जोर लगा लेगा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करने के लिए, यहाँ से वहाँ जाने के लिए उसको आधा घंटा लग जाएगा, क्योंकि वो तो अपना पूरी विल पावर लगा रहा है कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करने के लिए. बट उसकी जो यहाँ पे एसिटाइलकोलिन भी रिलीज हो रहा है, पर ये जो रिसेप्टर्स है यही आपके अवेलेबल नहीं है न्यूरोमस्कुलर जंक्शंस पे रिसेप्टर्स के अगेंस्ट, क्योंकि एंटीबॉडीज़ ने इन रिसेप्टर को ब्रेक डाउन कर दिया है. थोड़े बहुत जो हैं उसके लिए एसिटाइलकोलिन रिलीज हो रहा है, उसके लिए आपको बहुत ज़्यादा ताकत लगानी पड़ रही है मूवमेंट के लिए भी. दैट इज़ योर माइस्थीनिया ग्रेविस, राइट. सो दिस इज़ ऑल अबाउट योर मस्कुलर टिश्यूज, एंड नेक्स्ट वीडियो वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस अबाउट लास्ट टिश्यूज, दैट इज़ योर नर्वस टिश्यूज. ख़त्म कर दें नर्वस भी.